Welcome to our channel. We are happy to show some of the countries reopening their borders for tourism. It is possible that some of the links does not work. All are requested to check the updated entry status by visiting specific countries' information websites as situations keeps changing from time to time. All important links are given in the description for your reference. Austria. On June 16, 2020, Austria became one of the countries reopening their borders for tourism. However, the reopening phase only applies to citizens of the Schengen area and other countries included in this list. Travelers from a high-risk COVID-19 area must present a negative PCR test result taken no more than 3 days prior to the date of arrival in Austria. You can check Austria's Ministry of Tourism website for more information. Link given in the description. Brazil. Since July 30, 2020, Brazil is another country you can travel to without nationality restrictions if you travel by air. Brazil doesn't require a PCR test or quarantine, but recommends a 15-day self-isolation period for travelers with COVID-19 symptoms. Also, tourists must obtain COVID-19 travel insurance. For more information, check the Government of Brazil's official website. Link given in the description. Belgium. On June 15, 2020, Belgium was another country that opened for tourism to travelers within the EU and other countries included in this list. Belgium has a traffic light classification system relating to COVID-19 incidents, as you can see here. Travelers arriving from outside the Schengen area or from high-risk zones must submit this public health passenger locator form. Links given in the description. Cyprus. As of June 2020, Cyprus is one of the countries where you can travel. According to the Republic of Cyprus website, the country is classifying tourists into 3 groups based on risk. All travelers must register for a Cyprus flight pass. Link given in the description. Those in the low-risk group don't have to quarantine or present a negative PCR test. Medium-risk individuals must present a negative test result issued within 72 hours of arrival. High-risk travelers aren't permitted into Cyprus without an essential reason. Egypt. Egypt became one of the countries open for tourism on July 1, 2020. Most tourists must submit a negative PCR test result issued within 72 hours of arrival. However, some countries can submit a result issued within 96 hours of travel. Also, travelers must complete a health form when they arrive, and they must have COVID-19 travel insurance.
France. France has opened to tourism and vaccinated travelers can visit without restrictions. There is a traffic light system for unvaccinated travelers, so entry restrictions vary depending on the country/IES they have been at during the last 14 days. Germany. At the moment, only travelers from EU/Schengen area countries, travelers from approved countries, and vaccinated travelers from all other countries can enter Germany for any reason, including tourism. Entry requirements depend on which country you are traveling from. Travelers from certain EU/Schengen area countries and other countries can enter Germany without restrictions. All they need to do is present proof of full vaccination, recovery from COVID-19, a negative PCR test result from within 72 hours prior to entry, or a negative antigen test result from within 48 hours prior to entry. Travelers from high-risk areas must complete a digital registration form and provide proof of full vaccination, recovery from COVID-19, a negative PCR test result from within 72 hours prior to entry, or a negative antigen test result from within 48 hours prior to entry. Greece. As of June 2020, Greece is one of the countries open for tourism if you live in the European Union, the Schengen area, and other approved countries. All travelers must complete a passenger locator form before arriving in Greece. Unvaccinated travelers must have proof of a negative PCR COVID test result that was obtained within 72 hours before entry to Greece, a negative rapid antigen test from within 48 hours of entry, or proof of recovery from COVID-19. Ireland. As of July 21, 2020, Ireland is one of the countries you can travel to, although nationality restrictions apply. If you have been in one of the designated states for mandatory hotel quarantine in the last 14 days and you are unvaccinated, you must also pre-book accommodation at a designated quarantine hotel. You will have to quarantine there for 14 days from your arrival in Ireland and take an RT-PCR test on day 10 of your quarantine period. If that second RT-PCR test is negative, you may end your quarantine early. In case you are vaccinated, you can complete your quarantine at your accommodation or residence instead. If you are traveling from any other country, you must quarantine at your accommodation or residence for 14 days from your arrival in Ireland. You will then take an RT-PCR test at least 5 days after your arrival in Ireland. If that test is negative, you will be able to end your quarantine early. Besides, all travelers must submit a passenger locator form and present proof of a negative RT-PCR test result that was obtained within 72 hours prior to arrival in Ireland. Italy. As of June 3, 2020, Italy is one of the countries open for tourism, although only a few nationalities can enter. The restrictions to enter Italy vary depending on the origin of the traveler, since the countries are classified according to the rate of COVID cases and if they are countries of the European Union or not in List A, B, C, D and E. You can check the complete list of countries and their respective restrictions in our guide to Italy is open for travel. Netherlands. As of June 15, 2020, the Netherlands is another place where you can travel. That said, the government discourages all non-essential travel, and the borders are only open to citizens of the EU and a few other countries. Tourists from these countries must quarantine for 10 days upon arrival. All travelers must complete this health declaration form. Norway. Starting July 15, 2020, Norway is one of the countries you can travel to if you are a resident of the EU, the Schengen area, or the UK. As of November 9, all travelers coming from high-risk countries must present a negative PCR test taken within 72 hours of arrival and must quarantine for 10 days. Here is the full list of countries. Panama. Panama is one of the countries where you can travel as of October 12, 2020. All travelers must have a negative PCR or antigen test result that was obtained within 72 hours prior to arrival in Panama. They must also complete an electronic health affidavit. Unvaccinated travelers that are arriving from or have transited through high-risk countries must also get tested at the airport on arrival in Panama at their own expense. If the test is positive, they will have to quarantine for 14 days in a hotel/hospital designated by the Ministry of Health at their own expense. Portugal. As of June 12, 2020, Portugal is one of the countries where you can travel. Now, travelers from some countries can visit Portugal for essential and non-essential reasons. They must present proof of a negative RT-PCR test result from within 72 hours prior to boarding, a negative rapid antigen test result from within 48 hours prior to boarding, or an EU digital COVID certificate. They must also complete a passenger locator card, either online or during their flight. Travelers from certain countries must quarantine for 14 days from their arrival. South Africa. As of October 1, 2020, South Africa is one of the best countries in Africa that are open for tourism. It began accepting all nationalities on November 11. Tourists must present a negative PCR test issued no later than 72 hours before arrival. Once they land, they must undergo health screenings, and those with symptoms must quarantine. All travelers must download the COVID Alert SA mobile app and purchase COVID-19 travel insurance. Spain. As of June 21, 2020, Spain is somewhere you can travel to. Currently, vaccinated travelers can enter Spain from any country. Unvaccinated travelers can only enter Spain from EU/EEA countries and certain other countries, unless they have an essential reason for traveling. All travelers must complete an electronic health control form before they arrive in Spain. Travelers from EU/EEA countries that are considered risk areas must present an EU COVID digital certificate, which proves that they are either fully vaccinated, have a negative PCR test result from within 72 hours prior to arrival in Spain, or a negative antigen test result from within 48 hours of arrival, or have recovered from COVID-19. Sweden. Sweden is a place where you can travel to from the EU, UK, Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland, as well as other third countries that you can find on the Swedish police web page. Sweden doesn't require a PCR test or quarantine. For more information, check the official website. Switzerland. As of June 15, 2020, Switzerland is another place where you can travel. Those from the EU and other countries that the EU has recommended lifting restrictions can enter Switzerland for any reason. Depending on which country they've been in for the past 10 days, visitors may have to quarantine for 10 days upon arrival. You can find a complete list of high-risk countries on the Federal Office of Public Health's website. Other countries that the EU has recommended lifting restrictions can enter Switzerland for any reason. Thailand is one of the countries open for tourism, but it has some of the strictest regulations. First, travelers must have a valid visa unless they qualify for the visa exemption scheme. Once they have the approved visa, they must apply for a certificate of entry. Additionally, tourists must present a medical certificate for a negative RT-PCR test result that was obtained within 72 hours of departure, proof of COVID-19 travel insurance coverage of over $100,000, as well as a receipt. As of June 12, 2020, Turkey is somewhere you can travel if you aren't coming from one of the 6 countries that are banned. All unvaccinated travelers and travelers from the UK, Iran, Egypt, and Singapore must have proof of a negative PCR COVID test result that was obtained within 72 hours prior to arrival, or a rapid antigen test from within 48 hours prior to arrival in Turkey. All travelers must complete a Turkey entrance form within 72 hours before travel. There is no mandatory quarantine upon arrival for vaccinated travelers or for unvaccinated travelers from most countries. Ukraine. Starting September 28, 2020, Ukraine is a place where you can travel without nationality restrictions. All travelers must have COVID-19 travel insurance with a company registered in Ukraine, like the ones you can find here. Tourists from low-risk or green countries don't have to quarantine. Those from red zones must quarantine for 14 days and use the DiVitama mobile app or get a PCR test on arrival to shorten the quarantine to 24 hours or whenever the result comes in. Here is the list of green and red countries. United Arab Emirates. The United Arab Emirates has been one of the countries open for tourism since June 21, 2020. Entry restrictions vary depending on which emirate you are visiting. United States. As of August 6, 2020, the United States is one of the most heavily restricted countries open for tourism. Entry is prohibited for travelers who have spent the last 14 days in China, Brazil, Iran, Ireland, the UK, South Africa, and most European countries, except for American citizens. Depending on which US state you are entering, you may need to submit a negative PCR test and/or quarantine.